so much better than it was.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Show and Tell. This week we have Andy McMillan, and we have, Kate's ready to clap. And just a few really fast announcements. Announcement one. Still trying to get submissions to Annex Zine. It can be anything you want it to be, work, writing, jokes, whatever. Just send it to annexzine@gmail.com as soon as possible so we can get it printed out and have a cool zine. Go check out PSU.GD, our program website, if you haven't been there in a while, because there are a ton of internships and other opportunities that just got put up there. Stuff for Uncorked Studios, Instrument, Bitch Magazine. Sorry if you've never heard that word. And other stuff. So check that out if you're looking for a summer internship. And then just a note to mark your calendars. Be Honest is going to be happening on May 2nd, and there will be more info about how to take part in that as we get closer to spring break. So be on the lookout for that. And then they're doing some kind of open call for art and design work for the Lippman and White Gallery. But all I know about it is that Piper is in charge, and I don't think Piper's here to explain the details. So if that sounds fun, find Piper or maybe the Lippman and White website.
It's also on the PSU.GD website.
Oh, there's another reason to go to the website. All the info is on there. Anything else? Anybody have anything to share? No? Cool. All right. Well, let's get to it. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Are you ready to rumble? All right. Andy McMillan is a designer, publisher, and event organizer originally hailing from Belfast, Northern Ireland. He publishes The Manual, a design journal for the web, and organizes XOXO, an experimental festival celebrating independently produced art and technology here in Portland, Oregon. Let's welcome Andy McMillan.
Thank you. It's so nice to hear the last 6 years of your life summed up in one paragraph. And I'm going to attempt to do that through the medium of a keynote presentation. So hi, I'm Andy. Those are the words, I'm Andy. I do some things. As was previously mentioned, I run co-organize XOXO. We started that in 2012. I published a design journal called The Manual. And for 5 years, from 2009 through 2013, I organized a design conference called Build. So I have been living in Portland part-time since summer 2011. I've been here full-time since last year. I'm originally from Belfast, Northern Ireland, which is right there. Belfast is in Northern Ireland. There are two Irelands. There is one in the north, and there is the Republic of Ireland. The Republic of Ireland is a little bit more well-known for this kind of thing, and this font. We are a little bit better known for industrial design catastrophes like the Titanic and the DeLorean DMC-12. So I wanted to bring this up that I'm from Northern Ireland because when Kate asked me to speak originally, this is a little bit extra daunting for me because being Northern Irish comes with two kind of defining personality traits, which are sort of instilled at a cultural level, which are sarcasm and institutionalized modesty. So we find it, Northern Irish people typically find it very difficult to talk about the things that they do or have any kind of like public pride in their work, unless it's delivered through the medium of sarcasm. So I'm going to attempt to do that today. By not talking about myself, I'm actually going to discuss 275 people who are much more interesting than I am. And I'm going to start by talking about Build. So Build started in Belfast in 2009. It was born from frustration of going to a lot of design events and them all being mostly garbage, and I wanted to start something better. Build was also kind of pretty well known for focusing not on technical, practical process side of things. It was more theoretical ideas, stories about design. It was an event about design, but for web designers. So it approached design in a very broad sense, but it was sort of focused on web design audience. And that's not an audience that typically gets that kind of message very often. A lot of web design conferences are very technical. And so that's part of the reason I think that people enjoy that so much, is that it was a different approach. These are the first 37 people who are much more interesting than me. These 37 people spoke at Build over the course of 5 years. I don't want to pull any favorites here. All of these people delivered incredible talks. It was, for 5 years, I was consistently blown away at the level of quality in the talks. But one person in particular does stand out, and that's Wilson Miner, who is much more interesting than me. He is a designer who lives in San Francisco. He's worked at Apple previously. He was the head of design at Ardio for a spell. He was at Facebook, because so is everyone. And Wilson did a talk in 2011. He spoke at the first year of Build, but he also spoke again in 2011. He did a talk called When We Build. Wilson actually emailed me after the lineup was confirmed. We had the 6 speakers for the year already, and Wilson emailed and asked. He had written the talk after being at Build in 2009. He had written the talk, and he had more or less specifically written it for Build. And even though the lineup was confirmed, he asked if he could join. And so he showed up in November and delivered this talk, and it kind of blew everyone's minds. It was described like there was a standing ovation, everyone was in tears. It's very difficult to talk about this thing, because actually what we should do is just stop listening to me and watch it. But if you haven't seen this already, and actually quite a lot of you maybe have seen this and had no idea that it was a Build, but Wilson is kind of the reason probably that I will be remembered professionally, because I was the guy that facilitated him being able to do this very interesting and wonderful thing. So it was described as this like Woodstock moment, that people in the room were always going to treasure the fact that they were there to see it, and the people who weren't in the room are always going to lie about the fact that they had been. But actually, quite conveniently, it's a design conference, so we were able to put the talk online. This talk has been watched 2 million times, almost 2 million times, which Gangnam Style level is maybe not very impressive, but for a lecture that was given at a design conference in the middle of nowhere, it's actually pretty impressive. And so I would encourage you, I'm hiding little links up at the top of some of these slides, and I'll put the slides up whenever I'm done. I would encourage you to go and watch this. It's really rather phenomenal, and it would be impossible to describe, so I'm not even going to attempt to do so. Kind of a cop-out. So another person who you guys are probably a little bit more familiar with, everybody's best friend, Frank Marrow. Frank is much more interesting than me as well. He's a designer and a writer. He lives in Brooklyn, but he was in Portland for a little bit. He runs his own studio there called Another. The reason why I mentioned Frank is he spoke in 2010, and again, he actually did the closing talk in 2013, the very last talk at Build. But the talk that he did in 2010 was called The Shape of Design, which you might recognize because he turned it into a book. And so that was another kind of interesting thing that came out of Build being a thing for 5 years. There were a few other things that were interesting about Build. First off, it started as a conference. It was a one-day thing. It was pretty cut and dry. You showed up and you went to talks for the day, and that was more or less all that happened. But over the course of 5 years, it very quickly became a festival. And so we added events like we did this trivia night called the Standard Uses Open Book Exam, which was a quiz trivia night that you had to use the internet to cheat at because the questions were impossibly difficult. Here are the prizes, and there's Chris and Nick who hosted, and me telling them off for drinking too much. We hosted film screenings. We did a beer festival for the last 3 years. We had evening lectures from people who were maybe not designers, but were sort of orbiting the design world. Another person who's much more interesting than me is Scott Hansen, who played at Build in 2012 as Tycho. You might also maybe know that he's a graphic designer. He lives in San Francisco, and his graphic design work goes under ISO 50. That was probably the greatest day of my life. That show took 600 or 700 emails to book, and so when he actually showed up, it was pretty special. Yeah, so we had meetups and parties, and it was interesting because extending everything to a full week gave people a reason to come from further away. And because of that, over the course of 5 years, a lot of people showed up every year. It was very easy to justify traveling to. A lot of people actually came from Portland, San Francisco. It's very easy to justify traveling from the West Coast over to Ireland. If you're giving people a week of things to do, it costs as much to go to Build for a week as it would to go to a conference in New York for a couple days. So there were people coming from all over the world, and it built this incredible community over the course of 5 years, which I think is another reason why it's very highly regarded, because people sort of cherish not just that the event was pretty decent, but also like the people that they met there, and that there was this real sense of community that was built over the course of 5 years. It's also very difficult to talk about Build without using the word build or built. One of the other things that I think is kind of interesting, the first couple of years of Build, the workshops that we did were pretty dull. Not dull, I mean, they were pretty predictable. Web design conference, you're going to have web design workshops, you're going to learn about some emerging web technology. But in 2012, there was a lot of talk going on about craft, and what does craft mean if we're sitting in front of screens all day? And my reaction to that was not a tweet storm, which it probably should have been. I instead booked a series of workshops that were actually about craft. You weren't supposed to bring any devices or anything with you. You had to work with your hands for the day. So we did 4 of these. We did axe restoration with Best Knit Company. Hunter and Nick is there, are much more interesting than me. They flew in from Brooklyn and did this. It was a 2-day workshop. The second day we actually took everybody into the woods, and they chopped down a tree and cooked their lunch over the firewood that they had cut, which for a bunch of web designers, like, can you imagine? They were losing their minds. We also did a leathercraft workshop with Billy Kirk. Chris and Kirk were from New York, also much more interesting than me. Flew over and did a workshop, and everyone made card wallets and like sewed and dyed leather. That was pretty fun as well, again, for a bunch of web designers who've never handled leather before. We did coffee roasting with James from Blue Bottle Coffee, that came in from San Francisco. James is also considerably more interesting than me. And we did a chocolate workshop with Alex from Taza Chocolate. And again, that was just something a little bit different for internet people to be doing. And again, it was very, very well received. I'm going to take a tangent a little bit to talk about the identity work for Build, which is something I'm really proud of as well. But again, I can't really take too much to do with it because someone much more interesting than me was mostly responsible for it, and that man is Mr. Jez Burrows, who's a person that hopefully you've heard of as well. He's a designer and an illustrator and a publisher. He lives in San Francisco at the moment. He works in the Analog Research Lab at Facebook, but when I was working with him, he still lived in Edinburgh in Scotland. And there was a problem after the first year of Build, which is, this was the identity for the first year of Build. I will also give points to anyone who notices what is wrong with it.
Everything?
Well, it's terrible, but there's one actual glaring error that I think was done on purpose. It's Helvetica, if that's helpful.
I like that capital B on the bottom there.
Oh yeah. It's, the period is a circle. Helvetica's period is a square. Well done, design students, should have known that one. Come on. So yeah, I was not really super in love with this. It didn't really have any character. It didn't really say anything about the event, but it's very difficult to define the identity of something that you haven't experienced yet. So once the first build was over and I was able to sort of distill what it was into a creative brief, which in the first year of talking to Jess was just ranty, rambly phone calls, we started work on the identity for Build. I actually, because I had to write this, I got the opportunity to dig into a bunch of really old emails, and I found the first screenshot that Jez ever sent of like a work in progress. And so you can see this is what it ultimately ended up looking like. But you can see in the previous slide that it's kind of coming along and the little hex nut is up at the top. And this came to define build so well over the course of 5 years. I actually got it tattooed on my wrist. I dared everyone on Twitter in the second or third year that in the second year, if the tickets sold out, I would get the logo tattooed on my wrist, and then it sold out in a heartbeat. So I kind of kicking myself for that one. But yeah, I still love this to this day. I think it's timeless. And so when we finally had nice identity, we did the thing that two designers do, and we printed it on fucking everything. We did these little letterpress cards, and we got scout notebooks and some stickers and pencil. We got old these sort of DVD tins, and we laser etched the hex nut in the front. And then we shipped them to a bunch of people who had been supportive of the first year of the event, or people that I wanted to book to speak to kind of butter them up, and it totally worked. This is another thing actually that doesn't get to see the light of day very often. One of the very first things that Jez and I worked on together was this. It was an ad for a print magazine, which used to be a thing. And it was kind of deliberately nonsensical. I even originally didn't want to put the URL on the bottom. It's just a bunch of books that couldn't possibly exist to advertise the fact that Build was coming back. And we got a lot of emails about this, people asking like, what the fuck is this? Like, why did you put this in a magazine? It doesn't say anything. But the whole point with the original, the 2010 identity was that to kind of strike some balance between like Dharma initiative and Masonic sort of imagery. And so this kind of played into that quite nicely. This is another thing that was actually incredibly popular. Jez illustrated this, all of these like weird tools and put them in the hex nut, and then we printed them on the t-shirt. And people love this. In fact, I get asked pretty regularly to bring this back. Maybe guys throw it up in the Cotton Bureau or something at some point. We also did these banners for, there were like 4 big Guardian stands outside the venue, and printed them and they look like this, which is pretty rad. One of the other things I wanted to start that year was doing gifts for speakers. So Jez had a friend, Thomas Forsyth, another person who's much more interested than I am, who hand carved these wooden hex nuts. This is all the wood that he ordered, and then the first sort of prototype. And then we did a bunch of them, one for each of the speakers, one for me and one for Jez. And I think we can all agree that they are wonderful. So we carried it on. The identity was so strong that we didn't change it over the course of the next 4 years. Each of the years just got a different color. So this is the blue year. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of images from this year. I did manage to dig up the 4 Guardian banners that we did that were really nice. I got a Instagram filter style photo of them outside the venue. In the second year, we wanted to do something with the hex nuts again, but what really bothered me about the wood was that it was too light. I really wanted something that you could like kill someone with. So we cast them in brass. And again, it's pretty awesome. They're about this size, like they're actually pretty significant. You could clobber someone with them if you wanted to. Another thing that I will link to at some point whenever I'm finished is that Thomas actually recorded a like 7-minute long video of him casting these, and it's actually really fun, but it's also 7 minutes long and it wasn't appropriate to put in the middle of the talk. This is another thing that we did. Kyle Meyer is another person who's much more interesting than I am. He's a designer in San Francisco, originally from Minneapolis. He's working at Facebook at the moment as well, but he was at Victortel for a spell. You can see all of these little people are animated. They're all looking at each other. Those are the speakers for the year. This was also right on the cusp of the like HTML5 video spec getting played with for the first time. So this is one of the first kind of real, like we used that for very early on, and it was buggy as hell. And it's, but apparently it looks like the newspapers in Harry Potter. I haven't read Harry Potter or seen any of the movies, so people tell me that all the time, and I don't. I guess it probably does. Unfortunately, that's all I have from that year. Then Jez left and went to the Analog Research Lab and took a job at Facebook. And then we did the right year was 2012. And that's when these guys came on board, Fuzco, who I think was it Caleb is here, and he did a talk, right? Yeah. So they're all a bunch more interesting than I am. They are headquartered in Charleston, but apparently they also have an office in Portland. And so we, again, unfortunately have very few photos of the work that we did this year, because this was one of my favorite years of this, all of the sort of design ephemera that we did for Build. But we did, these were the best badges. I think these are the best badges I've done for anything. I was really, really happy with how these came out. The beer festival that we did that year too, we also brewed our own beer. I was, and still am, having a love affair with Portland, so you can see we called it the Rip City Triple IPA. People in Belfast never heard of IPAs before, so that was a lot of fun to give them a triple and also name it after Portland. And then Kyle came back and we built the 2012 website, which is another, I'm really happy with this too. This is like a one-pager of the whole of the event. We did all of these nice icons for everything too. Super into that as well. The last year of Build, of course, we had to go gold. Fosco signed off, and my buddy Dan, who also is known as BT, he lives in Salt Lake City, much more interesting than I am. Designer, painter, illustrator, works for Big Cartel. And very few people have actually seen these because we did a very limited run. We did a illustrated series of technologies from the sort of information age through time. So this is supposed to be speech and like talking, singing. Then we did the linotype. This is Morse code. This is satellite communication. This is computing. This is sort of touch devices. And then we printed them, and we did it with this like really nice gold foil block. And I unfortunately only have these weird square photos of it. But these are really nice. We printed them as postcards, and every person who came to Build that year got one. And then we did a series of like 6 of each of them in slightly larger format prints, of which I still have some actually. I should really dig them up and put them online at some point. We also did like an interesting gold foil with the badges too, but unfortunately the person who took this photo decided that black and white was a better choice. But I was pretty into these badges, so we did too. So that's some Build stuff. It's also worth recapping, and I should probably say this at a few points throughout the talk. I did almost none of this. Like, none of this design work is actually mine. I was sitting on the sidelines directing it. The whole point of this talk is supposed to be that other people are much more interesting than me, and so far I think it would definitely prove that. So I want to start talking about the manual a little bit. The manual is essentially the publication version of Build. It's, again, more concerned with theory and idea and stories rather than technical, practical process, tips, tricks kind of thing. Web design publications are again, very technical, and I thought that it would be interesting to try something a little bit different. Originally, it was called the manual because it was something that people were supposed to get for free when they came to Build. It was supposed to play into the whole sort of Dharma initiative kind of thing. You were being handed a manual whenever you came through the door. But as we talked about it a little bit, it felt like it was appropriate to turn it into its own thing. And so we did. Again, I did that with Jazz and Carolyn Wood, who, again, 2 people are way more interesting than I am. Carolyn was the editor-in-chief for the first 3 issues. And there's a bunch more people, 57 through 65 of people who are much more interesting than me. That's the lineup of authors for issue 1 and issue, or the lineup of authors for the first issue as well as the illustrators. There's 6 pieces in each book, and each piece gets partnered with an illustrator, and I'll show you some illustrations shortly as well. And so we launched a Kickstarter project. It was also while I was still in Belfast, so we kind of cheated a little bit and launched a Kickstarter project while Kickstarter wasn't supported in the UK, but it still got funded, and we printed the first book. Actually found this old image of what, whenever we were putting the production spec together, this is roughly what we thought it was going to look like. And this one's a little bit more developed. And you can see that's pretty much exactly what it looks like. Then we did some other stuff. We went back to Scout and did some notebooks again. There's a little postcard and bookmarks and things for the Kickstarter backers. And in fact, there's another thing. It was really fun putting this talk together because I dug up a lot of weird old stuff. Someone emailed right after the Kickstarter project to mention that the manual actually looked like the KitchenAid like manual that they received whenever they bought this like, secondhand KitchenAid at some point. And the even weirder thing, there's an M on the front cover for no particular reason, and also it was printed at exactly the same printer that we used in Iceland, and but it was from the 70s or 80s, so I guess like no one noticed. But I dug this up and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that person being feeling a little bit ripped off because they thought that we just copied the KitchenAid people. So yeah, then it went pretty well. Kickstarter project got funded. We sold a few thousand more, and so we decided to keep going. Here are a bunch more people who are much more interested than I am. Authors and illustrators for issue 2 and for issue 3. And so whenever we finished the first volume, we also made this little wooden box to put them in. Nate Utesh designed it, and it was done by Jason Lefton, who works at Big Secret. And there are also 2 people who are way more interesting than I am. And some of the detailed shots. This is one of my favorite things that we've ever done. And it also, like, I've had mine since we produced them a couple of years ago, and it still smells incredible. And actually, so we took a little bit of a hiatus, but we relaunched the manual last year, and we did issue 4, and it started shipping in November of last year. And that looks like this. Frank Shimaro did the cover design for this. The idea is that every 3 books we will change the designer. It'll always have the same physical format, so it'll still line up on your shelf, but it'll look different. That's why there's a full cotton wrap, and we did the gold or the green foil in the front. And yeah, again, it didn't really make any sense to like, I don't have any of the books in my apartment for some reason. I was going to bring some to let you see them, but I thought what I could do instead is show you some of my favorite illustrations from each of the issues. This is Owen Gately did this for issue 1. This is David Shin's piece for issue 2. This is issue 3. If it's not apparent at this point, each issue is 1 color, so everyone gets 1 value to play with, and that's it. And this is what Richard Perez did for issue 4 for Wilson's piece. And yeah, we've published some really beautiful articles, and they've all been accompanied by these wonderful illustrations. And we're going to keep doing them. There's another one coming in May. And so another thing that we did then at the end of last year was that we decided that, or we've actually been working on this for a little while. We put all of the editorial online, or we wanted to put everything on the web. And so we launched a Kickstarter project to fund it. Paulo, unfortunately, in retrospect, Paulo only gets a little mention on this one slide, but he is Paulo and I have been working together every single day for like the last 3 years. And it's unfortunate that he's just mentioned here. Lisa is the new editor-in-chief, and Mari helped us relaunch launch our Kickstarter project. And so this is the Kickstarter project. Again, it got funded, and we put everything up online. We made an ebook edition. We somehow corralled Roman Mars into reading the entirety of issue 4, and we did an audiobook edition as well. And this is what one of the articles looks like on the web. And so it's free and open to everyone. You can read it for free, and then you buy the issues if you're interested in supporting it. We also went back and redid the identity. So this is Frank Couchman did this mark, which we could then scale up and use in sort of different interesting ways. And then we did a Joy Division t-shirt with it, which was pretty fun. And also tote bags, which everyone has, okay, too many tote bags, but this is really nice. And I have one of these, I get stopped all the time, like, where'd you get that tote bag? Like, don't you have enough already, person in Portland? You almost definitely do. Okay, so the other thing that I do is this festival called XOXO. It's a celebration of independence. So it focuses on people who retain creative and financial control of their work. They're doing interesting things, using technology in interesting ways to sort of do what they love. And so the other person who's much more interesting to me is Andy Bayo, who's here. I think that might be the first person that I'm embarrassed to mention. Andy is a person who's way more interesting than me. He founded a site called upcoming.org. Everyone in this room is also much younger than both of us, so maybe you didn't use it. sold it to Yahoo in 2005, was one of the first people through the door at Kickstarter, is an incredible writer and just very lovely individual. And I feel very lucky that I get to work with him and that I get to be consistently reminded that he is much more interesting than I am. And these people are also much more interesting than me too. This is the original lineup of the first XO, which we launched as a Kickstarter project. Again, fully funded. I have a really good run with Kickstarter projects, apparently. And so it's fully funded, and we convinced a bunch of people to show up in Portland. This is a Yale Union. Here is the Kickstarter project inside the Kickstarter project. We got food carts and we closed the street outside. We had a bunch of interesting, lovely people talk. We then programmed, kind of carrying over this idea of building an event around a festival. The talks would happen on Saturday and Sunday, but we did a full program of events from Thursday through to Sunday night. So, and they all focus as well on independent makers. So we built this indie arcade, and this is people playing Johann Sebastian Joust. We had music, a Holocene, all indie artists. We did film screenings and Q&A with the filmmakers. Everyone had to show up with their film. Here's a bunch of people having a really good time at XO. Here's us crying because everyone's having too much of a good time at XO and it's overwhelming. And so we decided to do another one. It went really, really well. We did XO 1 year at a time, and because the first year went so well, we decided to do another one. So here's another list of people who are much more interesting than me. And actually, we've done recap videos. Paul Searle has recorded recap videos for us every year, and all three of them are really fun to watch, but my favorite one still to this day is the second year. And so I'm going to play the recap video from the second year, which I think sums up really nicely what XO is all about.
We have pulled together as many ridiculously amazing, awesome people as we can find, and the hope is that great things come out of that. It's about retaining creative and financial control of your own work. It's about gaining control of your own fate and your own destiny. It's about greatly profiting from the work that you do, and it's about keeping things interesting. It's about making new things and putting them out in the world, and that takes a unique kind of bravery.
Today I want to talk about not having any idea what I'm doing.
This is kind of my therapy session with myself. Stop measuring yourself with other people's rulers. They don't matter to you. The more we expose, the more vulnerable we were to our fans, the more, instead of judging us, the more bought in they were, and the more they felt like they were part of it too.
When you put that little bit of yourself out there, it can travel around the world and across generations and come back to you in ways you can never see coming.
The speakers that you see, the musicians that are going to be at Holocene tonight, the video game designers that are arcade, the films, the games and the game designers that you meet at tabletop, the food carts on the screen. Every single one of these things was chosen for a reason. I want to talk to you about the internet, because I think I figured it out.
The internet, which is a space of infinite possibility where I and so many other artists found ourselves, may serve to reinforce the same old hierarchies.
It's not just about getting rid of the middlemen between the good creators and the good fans.
I'm going to try to give you guys the story that we don't usually give people.
Oh my god, this is the coolest thing I have ever done.
Don't waste this, keep everyone guessing, and make me proud. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, and maybe we'll see you again. Cheers.
Yay. Maybe that is also my favorite video because it's the only one I make an appearance in. I'm not in the other two. So yeah, the second XO went incredibly well. And again, we decided to do another one. This is last year. A whole bunch more people who are way more interested than me. In fact, it needed 2 slides to sum them up this year. We really expanded the festival program last year. And so I'm gonna come back to that in a little minute, but it's talk for design people. I'm gonna talk about the identity work a little bit. And unfortunately, there's so much stuff over the 3 years of XO, it would be hard to kind of capture all of it. last year in particular, I was really, really happy with the work that we did, and so I want to touch on one project. But first off, these people are much more interesting than me. Josh Colby, Stephen, and Brett at Jolby, who I'm sure you guys all know, did really incredible job with the art direction and a lot of the production on the identity work for XO last year. In fact, they just published this very convincing piece in their portfolio, all of the wonderful things that they did for us. And again, that's something that you should look at instead of me inevitably spending 20 minutes going through how fantastic they are. Richard and Adam also deserve a shout out for being way more interesting than me. Richard did our water bottle, which I conveniently brought with me, and Adam did a design for a tote bag. We brought more collaborators in last year than we had done before. But the piece that I want to talk about is something that Eric Maranovich did for us along with Cult. This is the original concept for it. We moved XO from the YU to a building in industrial southeast last year called the Red, which EcoTrust just bought. And they very graciously allowed us to put this giant mural on the side of it. This building is an entire block long. And so, again, I feel like I'm rambling. There's a really fun time-lapse video of this being produced, and I'm going to play that as well. Let you take a look at it. It. And so you can see it in the background of the shot. Unfortunately, I don't have any good panning shots because it is an entire block wide. But we also fabricated all of the stuff in the yard, and we built this big social area in front. There's some other people enjoying being social in the front of the building. Again, we had food carts come in again with some really incredible talks. We did our arcade again. We did the second year of an event that we started in 2013, which is Tabletop, which again, we had even more people at Tabletop than we'd had the year previous. We did music again. You can see Andy and I in the front clapping along in a very dignified manner to Jack Conte losing his mind. We also did Story, which was essentially live podcast performances. And unfortunately, I didn't find a good photo for the fact that we did film and broadened it to animation this year, but that is Pendleton Ward and Natasha Allegri playing video games together. Pendleton Ward's the creator of Adventure Time, who just showed up out of the blue, and Natasha Allegri created BM Puppycat, and she premiered the first episode at XO. Unfortunately, no one cared to take any photos at the film and animation evening. Here are some people who are having a good time, and here's us getting emotional about the fact that everyone is having a good time. And so that's more or less it. It's 275 people. None of those people are in rank order. I also definitely forgot a lot of people. I just because this was kind of a lot of fun to piece together, I found a lot of old work that I totally forgot that I'd ever been involved in. I really wanted to include, but I was worried that I was going to go on for too long, which may already be happening. And so, yeah, I just want to, if anyone is watching online and I forgot you, I'm terribly sorry. So the whole point, I think, is to sort of sum up with some sage wisdom and like, why did I decide to do a talk in this way? And whenever I was thinking about putting together the presentation, I was thinking, what would I want to hear whenever I was back in school, which actually was not that long ago. Because back whenever I'm going to say it, when I was your age, I felt like a total fraud. I didn't think that I was good enough to do anything. All of the things that I wanted to do, I didn't feel like I had the capacity to do any of them. Or I certainly wasn't capable of doing them on my own. And actually, this comes up a lot because this, unfortunately, I know it's only got like 15 faves, but it comes up a lot that I posted this on Twitter because people, like, for some reason, like a lot of people retweeted it too. Again, not that many people, but 1,175 days ago in November of 2011, I said this on Twitter: surround yourself with good people, and everything else will inevitably fall into place. And this was kind of mushy claptrap at the time because I just had coffee with a friend and I was feeling really good. And I went home and I tweeted this and I was like, oh, I'm going to regret that in 1,175 days. But actually, there's something in this. Like, I was thinking about this a lot whenever I was putting these slides together. It is kind of true. There's something uniquely empowering about working with other people. You can do things that you wouldn't have been able to do on your own. My life for the last 6 years has essentially been the story of collaboration. None of the things that I showed you today would have been possible if I was doing them on my own. In fact, I was really just sitting on the sidelines, art directing. Working with other people can make up for gaps in your own experience. It can introduce you to amazing people, which it has done. It can let you travel the world. I wouldn't be in Portland if it wasn't for Build. It can make you available to opportunities that you wouldn't have received on your own. And it can make you feel like you're way more interesting than you actually are. That's it. Thank you. So some talk of a Q&A. I also put a discount code up in the manual store if anyone wants to grab. The print books are $25, but the digital editions are cheaper if you want to get $5 off. PSU BFFs.
Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, kind of. Yeah, does anyone have any questions?
Nina, in the back. You're going to have to go to the microphone.
What's the best way to do that?
Hi. I was just going to ask you how it was working with Anita Sarkeesian, who I know was at the last XO Fest. I think she's amazing, and I was just wondering if you had any experiences working with her.
I don't know if I can accurately define what it was like to work with her. Yeah, I mean, it was incredible. It was incredible to meet her. It was incredible to give her a platform to be able to talk. The atmosphere in the room whenever she spoke was just something else entirely. I was in tears for most of the talk. Anita Sarkeesian, if anyone doesn't know, is a feminist media critic. She has a series that she has. It's a YouTube series, kind of critiquing culture and media through sort of a feminist lens. At the moment, or for the past short while, she's been doing that to video games. Hopefully, if I say Gamergate in this room, most of you have never heard of that before and will never have to experience anything like that. But she's kind of been at the center of a lot of petulant young men getting pissed off that nothing actually is happening to them at all. And so she came and did a talk at XO about her experiences in dealing with that, and it was incredible, but also really bizarre that we had to have armed security present, that she had someone watching her when she was there, that there was a guy that actually showed up handing out flyers saying, like, Anita Sarkeesian is like brainwashing. She's like, it's a call to arms for a feminist army, and she's coming to destroy all white men. I'm like, that seems like it would take a lot of effort for starters. Like, you really want to do that? Like, I wouldn't want to do that. That's a lot of work. Just completely batshit crazy. So yeah, it was. I am struggling to summarize how moving it was to experience her talk and what it meant to me to be able to be part of that. But hopefully my stumbling kind of sums it up a little bit. Does anybody else have any other questions? I'm kind of a weird person who doesn't really do anything. Like, what would you ask someone like me? Like, I would have absolutely no idea either.
I know that you're being incredibly modest, but I mean, it takes a real, it's an incredible special quality for someone to be able to organize and activate. Like, none of that stuff would happen if you weren't the person who's like, I want this to happen, and these are the people that I think are going to be really good working on that. And it takes a good person for people to want to be working with someone like that too. So that's huge. That's completely huge.
Can you deliver that in the form of a question?
Yeah, being one of those obnoxious Q&A people that don't have a question that just says.
Well, thank you. That's very sweet of you to say. I appreciate that. But I'm too Northern Irish to hear it. Yeah.
What do you think of the work ethic in Portland or the Pacific Northwest versus Ireland, or
creatively?
Yeah, I mean, I get asked about this a lot because the sort of idea of Portlanders is that we're all slackers. I'm sorry, I identify as a Portlander. I'm sorry, I know I haven't been here for very long, but I definitely do. I get upset about like the street fee, and I'm like, anyway. So yeah, I mean, it comes up a lot, and the whole like Portlandia kick outside of Portland. Everyone's like, "Oh, young people going to retire." Like, okay, shut the fuck up. It's because that is not my experience of Portland at all. Some of the hardest working people I know live here, and to a fault. It's impossible to get anyone to go for a beer. Like, everyone just seems to be constantly working. So I mean, in comparison to Ireland, certainly it's much easier to get people to go for a beer. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think that Portland gets a bad rap. That it, because it's a very young city, it's not energetic in the right way. That's bullshit. Everyone I know here works super hard, and you guys obviously do too, or you wouldn't be here. Yeah, is that okay for that opinion? Asking me more questions will get me pissed off, because I love giving like pissed off answers. So it's way more fun. Have you got an actual question that pisses me off? I'm so pissed that you left about the question. Uber. Anyone want to hear my thoughts on that?
Yeah, actually I do.
No, you don't.
I'm curious. Okay, let me collect my thoughts. Okay. I relate a lot with what you said about how, like, when you're younger, when you're a student, feeling like a fraud, because I kind of always feel like I'm faking it, and then people just kind of buy it. And I'm wondering if, like, I mean, I think that's something that a lot of people relate with, but I'm wondering if you, I don't know how to word this correctly, if you experienced, or if you do experience, like, legitimate fraud, or if you feel like there's a fine line. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, could you elaborate on that thought a little bit more?
Yeah, I can elaborate.
Yeah, that wasn't a question.
No, but I
gave it back.
You got me started. That's all that matters. Yeah, I mean, there's a few different layers to that. I mean, I'm constantly petrified that the things that I do will, for some reason, go away, and I will find myself with nothing to do. Because who the hell would hire me? I do very weird, specific stuff, and it's a legitimate concern. Like, well, who would I work for? Plus I would be impossible to work for. I'm a prick, so you don't want to work with me. I've got myself into this like cozy little situation where I only really have to answer to myself, and it's wonderful. Working with me would be terrible. So yeah, there's that, but in terms of feeling like a fraud, I mean, like, this is a thing that we talk about all the time. Everybody feels like a fraud. And I mean, the only solution is two things. Either work your ass off anyway, or you do what I did and you go find other people to work with who make you not look like a fraud, and then people don't notice. I mean that's it. Like, oh, I have a real problem with design events and design talks. Also, I'm doing a design talk, I guess, at the moment, but they're like preaching answers that can apply to everyone, or like some sort of philosophy, or like trying to give advice. Really, the piece of advice that I wanted to leave with is that what worked for me was not working on my own. But the answer to everything is just work. The only way that you're going to get anything done, the only way that you're going to get noticed, the only way that you're going to get any kind of creative satisfaction is to just do stuff. Like, that's really as simple as it gets. Yeah, I mean, I think, was that even helpful a little bit? Perfect. Uber, on the other hand, can get the fuck out of here. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse because the internet's on. I know the internet doesn't like bad language. Uh-oh. Yeah.
Does anyone else have another question, or we can? That was kind of.
I have one more question.
Okay. I can repeat it. You don't have to get up again.
Okay.
It's fine.
How did you get into like conference organizing? Like, how did you go from like, I want to organize a conference to like there being a conference?
Well, first off, if you're asking that question because you want to do one, don't. I'm already doing all of them. I don't mind. Yeah, well, not just that, they're also really not particularly lucrative, and it's a lot of hard work. There's probably other stuff that you could do, like become an Uber driver. They're pretty low paid, right? But I mean, it's the same origin story that almost everything good has. I was going to a lot of things that were bad, and it was pissing me off, and I was complaining to my friends that they were bad, and they told me to shut up and fix it, and so I went and did it. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing, but I registered buildconference.com, and I emailed some people that I thought were interesting, and I booked a venue, and I did it. I think one thing that's really helpful to have is a blatant disregard for your own financial welfare. That's really helpful, especially if we're running a conference. But there's not really any trick to it. I don't like spending, and I know I have friends here who are going to think that this is not true, but I don't like to spend a lot of my time complaining about things. Stop laughing, Daniel. So instead what I like to do is fix it, put up or shut up. If something is broken, there's no point in going on Twitter and ranting about it for a week to blow off steam. Why don't you just try to do a better job? And if you can't do a better job, then you'll fail and you'll lose all your money. Who cares? That's fine. It's totally manageable. So yeah, I mean, there's not really any trick to it. It was the same thing with the manual. I started it because I was annoyed that there wasn't a publication that I wanted to read, so I had to go and start it. And I also have like some kind of sort of sadomasochistic tendency to make people do things that I really don't like doing, like public speaking. I really typically don't enjoy I'm enjoying this, but I typically don't enjoy public speaking. So I started a conference. I really don't like writing, so I started a publication. The next thing I kind of identify that I don't enjoy, I'm going to get a bunch of people to do it and try to charge money for it. Again, I think there was an answer to the question buried in there somewhere. Good luck finding it. That's all I got. Oh, yeah, one more. I do have to get up.
I'm loud, so I do appreciate your statement about surrounding yourself with good people. And I'm probably a lot older than a lot of you here, but I've been in the business for a long time, and I do have to say I love the people that I work with, and the people that you surround yourself with give you, it's the aura, and that they bring creativity to the plate, and also about people say, well, should I ask first? Nah, just go ahead and do it, and then ask forgiveness for later,
Can I get that in the form of a question? I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's even easy to see, like days that I sit in my apartment and work on my own versus days that I sit even in a coffee shop with other people, even if I'm not talking to them. There is something about being around other people, even if you're not necessarily working with them. Yeah, I totally agree. Well put, probably better than anything I said today. Yeah, it's lighting up. Hey, Sam.
One last question.
Hey, Andy. So you published on paper instructions about publishing on the net, which is a great contrast. We've talked a little bit about publishing on paper nowadays and how I don't know if it's become more difficult, but it's certainly
That, yeah, I kind of glanced over that because it's a whole other big thing. Taking the manual from being exclusively print publication to being something that's free online, kind of totally changing not only the makeup of the publication, but the business model as well, and kind of crossing our fingers and hoping that generosity would be the new business model rather than selling books for $25. I mean, I don't think anyone has the answers. Publishing is in this really weird flux and has been for quite a while, where no one really knows entirely what's going on. Ebooks are still pretty terrible. E-readers are still pretty terrible. Like no one. There's a nice analogy, which I'm going to totally butcher about. And I'm stealing this from Frank actually from this talk that you gave at Bill about whenever plastic was invented, they made everything look like wood because they didn't know what the hell plastic was, so they were just like, well, we'll just make it look like wood for a while. And that's kind of like ebooks kind of feel like they're in that clumsy moment as well, because like, what the hell is it supposed to be? What is a digital book? You know, at the moment it just looks like a screen version of a print book. Could probably be way more interesting. So no one really knows what's going on with digital publishing. There's a lot to be said for the very specific niche that I find myself in, which is a web design publication for web designers that was never available on the web for anyone to read. It's kind of a little bit dumb. Like the entire industry has been built on sharing information, and like people anytime someone's just discovers something, they write it up. They put a blog post up like, oh, I found this like bug in Firefox. Probably a lot of them, and here's the reset style sheet or whatever. You can tell I haven't done web design in a long time. They still have reset style sheets. So it seems a little bit counterintuitive that there would be a publication about like furthering the discourse in web design, but you can only read it in a book. Like it was playing into the romance of designers enjoying print physical things too much, and it was nonsense. So that's why we put everything online. As to whether there's a sustainable business model to be found there, designers still like buying nice things. The books will always have a high production spec. It will always be print first. Like I always consider the printed book, and printed books and things that you ship to people are much easier to sell than digital things. But where that ends up, if it's going to continue to be a thing, if I'm going to have anything that I've learned that I'll be able to share with other people, that I have absolutely no idea. We just relaunched the manual at the end of last year. I have absolutely no idea if it's going to be possible to make it a success, if it being print and ebook and on the web and an audiobook. I have no idea, but it seemed like a fun thing to try, so we're going to give it a go. And again, there probably was a nugget of an answer buried in there somewhere. I do like rambling. All right.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you so much for having me and everyone who helped. Thank you for listening.